What are you doing? Staring at that screen, suffocating on the hope of a single notification? Stop. There is a brutal truth that most men are too naive to see. Women don't crave a presence that is cheap. They hunger for an absence that is expensive. The moment you vanish, you stop being the annoyance in her eyes. You transform into a void of mystery, a psychological puzzle that her instincts are biologically incapable of ignoring. Look at Julian. When the woman he loved started pulling away, treating his affection like a common commodity, Julian didn't beg. He didn't chase. He chose a path that was agonizing, yet filled with power. 21 days of absolute silence. Week 1? She felt relief. The burden of replying was gone. But by week 2, that silence started getting loud. It was deafening. Why isn't he explaining himself? Why isn't he complaining? The breaking point came in week 3. A single photo. Julian, sitting in the stillness of an ancient library, sunlight carving a path across the pages of his book. No sappy caption. No indirect messages. Just the cold, calm composure of a man who was clearly thriving in a world that didn't require her presence. That photo was a bucket of ice water to her ego. A terrifying question began to haunt her. Did he find peace without me? That is the exact moment the panic sets in. Julian's silence did what 10,000 promises could never do. It forced her to hunt through every memory, every old text, desperate to find the exact moment she lost this man of substance. Never forget, mystery is the catalyst for all attraction. And silence? Silence is the most powerful declaration a man can ever make about his own worth. In the high-stakes game of emotional power, the test always arrives when you least expect it. When the woman in your life suddenly turns cold, understand this. It isn't just a mood swing. It is an instinctive silence test. She is measuring your core. She is looking to see if you are a steady warrior, a mountain that cannot be moved, or if you're just a vulnerable child starving for her validation. The moment you choose to chase, the moment you start begging for answers, you have officially handed her the keys to your kingdom. Take Liam. He was the guy who used to believe that being available 24/7 was the ultimate proof of love. One night, she flaked on him. She canceled their plans at the very last second with a shallow excuse just to go out with her friends. Old Liam would have spiraled. But this time, he replied with only 4 words, "Sounds good. Have fun." No follow-up questions. No guilt trips. Zero interrogation. He went silent and moved on with his night as if her absence didn't even register on his radar. That mysterious, unshakable calm kept her awake all night long. She was baiting for a weak reaction, but all she found was a wall of powerful silence. Liam won the psychological war by refusing to even step onto the battlefield. Never forget, the man who remains unfazed by emotional turbulence is the only one truly holding the wheel. When you can no longer be manipulated, you have already won. Deep within our DNA, there is an ancient, undeniable law of nature. We never truly crave what we already possess. By instinct, women are hardwired to be drawn to that which they cannot fully control or predict. A man's silence isn't just a lack of words. It is a biological alarm ringing in the female mind, awakening a dormant drive to hunt and explore. If you are always there, answering every meaningless text, appearing the second she calls, you have turned yourself into dead prey. And remember, no hunter wastes their energy on a target that has already stopped resisting. Look at Mark. He used to be a commodity, available 24/7 like a vending machine for his ex-girlfriend's every whim. Until the day he slammed that door shut. He stopped responding. He vanished like a ghost into the shadows. Suddenly, Mark wasn't the one left behind anymore. He became a limited edition masterpiece. That scarcity created a surge in value that was psychological, primal, and overwhelming. She began to feel a restless, primal anxiety, the fear of losing something precious she once owned. She didn't start craving Mark because he suddenly became a better man. She wanted him because, for the first time, earning 1 second of his attention required effort. It required her to prove herself. It required her to hunt. You cannot beg for respect. You must create scarcity to force the world to honor your presence. Stop being the free sample. Become the prize, the high-end reward that can only be reached by those willing to put in the work. Have you ever wondered why the harder you try to express yourself, the further she drifts away? The truth is, attraction is never built on long-winded explanations. It is nourished by tension and the quiet power of distance. In the realm of emotion, radical transparency is the assassin of passion. When you lay out every corner of your life, when everything becomes as clear and predictable as a textbook, curiosity dies. and with it, the fire of attraction burns out. A woman doesn't hunger for a man who is an open book. She craves a man who forces her to use her imagination to fill in the blanks. Look at the shift in Chris. He used to be an open book, awkward and overeager. Every time she asked about his day, he would overshare every detail, from what he ate to who he met, hoping that honesty would create a connection. But all he got in return were bored sighs and a growing coldness. Until Chris finally understood the law of light and shadow. One morning, when she asked that same old question, "What are you doing today?" Chris didn't lay it all out. He simply smiled and left her with a phrase that lingered, "A secret project. I'll tell you more when the time is right." That one sentence acted like a spark to her primal instincts. The boredom vanished. Suddenly, she was the one texting, the one probing, the one trying to lean into his world. Why? Because Chris had created psychological tension that she felt compelled to resolve. Do not fear the silence or the small secrets. They are the invisible threads that pull her back to you. Remember, light only shines because of the shadows it casts. And the most valuable man is the one who keeps a private sanctuary, a world of his own that no one can fully conquer. Never make the fatal mistake of trying to fix a woman's cooling emotions. It is a futile battle, one you are guaranteed to lose. Stoicism teaches us a harsh but liberating truth. You can never redirect the wind of another person's heart, but you have the absolute power to command your own sails. Instead of draining your soul begging for her attention, reclaim that power. Redirect every ounce of that energy into rebuilding your own life. Look at Alex's journey of rebirth. He used to live like a ghost, haunting his own phone, wasting away as he waited for a single signal from the girl who pushed him away. But in a moment of awakening, Alex chose to vanish into the shadows of discipline. No more explanatory texts. No more checking her status. Instead, Alex poured his sweat into the gym, forging his muscles into steel, and spent late nights conquering a new language. His silence wasn't a cowardly retreat, it was a proud, purposeful obsession. When she finally crossed paths with him again, seeing a version of Alex that was sharper, more refined, and radiating a terrifyingly confident energy, a brutal realization hit her. She was no longer the center of his universe. The moment you stop treating her like the sun, she begins to feel the biting cold of solitude. She starts craving to pull back into your orbit. Don't chase the ghosts of the past. Upgrade yourself into a future she can never reach without giving her absolute best. You don't need to defeat her. You only need to defeat the weak version of yourself from yesterday. True silence is not a game of manipulation. It is a profound descent into the dark corridors of your own soul. Experts call this shadow work, the act of staring down the parts of yourself you've been too afraid to face. When you finally cut the cord of communication, a painful truth surfaces. You don't actually miss her as much as you think. What you're actually feeling is the terror of being worthless without her validation. A Stoic man understands a fundamental law of power. Handing the keys to your happiness to another person is the most bitter form of voluntary slavery. Look at David. In the deep, silent hours of the night with nothing but his journal, he performed a brutal psychological surgery on himself. Instead of stalking her digital footprints on social media, David forced himself to answer one question. Why am I trembling at the thought of losing someone who stopped valuing me a long time ago? He realized his emotional codependency was an invisible chain, forged from the jagged shards of past wounds and a broken sense of self. David began to shatter those chains. He accepted that his worth is an immutable fact, completely independent of whether she stays or leaves. And the very moment he made his internal declaration, "I am okay even without you," a mysterious raw power surged through him. When you no longer need, you become invincible. This level of self-mastery radiates a quiet authority that makes chasing obsolete. Why? Because now you are the only source of light in your own universe. Remember, the world only bows to the man who doesn't need its permission to be happy. The moment your phone screen lights up after a month of deafening silence, your world stands still. A short, simple hey pops up. It is the sweetest, most dangerous trap, and it's the one most men fall for instantly. But listen to me, the fatal error isn't that she walked away. The fatal error is letting her walk back in too easily. If she could leave your life without a reason, she needs to understand that the door is now guarded by a barrier called self-respect. Look at how Ryan played the game. When that text from his ex appeared after 30 days of radio silence, he didn't flinch. He let the phone sit there, cold and silent on the table, ignoring the curiosity screaming in the back of his mind. He spent the next 5 hours finishing his workout and crushing his personal projects. Why? because he was no longer a man starving for the scraps of someone's affection. When he finally replied, it wasn't with excitement. It was with a bone-chilling calm. He refused to let her back into his soul through a low-effort message. Instead, he moved for a face-to-face meeting, a space where he was no longer a passive listener, but the architect resetting every single boundary. Ryan wasn't just answering a text, he was teaching her how to treat him. You don't need to be angry. You just need to hold your ground as a man in control. Make her realize that your presence is a privilege, not a given. When you master the art of the boundary, you stop being a puppet to your emotions, and you officially become the leader of the game. The moment she knocks on your door to return is not a time for celebration. It is the time for the buffer zone, a period of testing. Never commit the fatal error of restoring the status quo overnight, acting as if the fracture never happened. A man of value understands one thing: his presence is a privilege. To re-enter his sanctuary, there is a price to pay, and that price is paid in consistency and relentless effort. This is the moment you filter the gold of sincere love from the dust of temporary loneliness. Look at Thomas. When the woman who walked away tried to find her way back, he didn't stumble. He didn't lash out in anger. Instead, he met her with a terrifyingly calm gaze and declared, "I value our history, but I need to see absolute stability in your actions before we move a single step further." In that moment, Thomas shifted from the victim to the supreme judge of his own life. For the next month, he didn't pour in more energy. He didn't rush. He simply stood back and observed. It was the aura of a master, a man who no longer fears loss, that earned her absolute respect. Real attraction doesn't come from easy forgiveness. It comes from steel boundaries. Make her understand, walking out of your life was easy, but earning your trust back is a mountain she must climb. Never hand the keys to your heart back to someone who hasn't proven they won't drop them again. What if your silence is met with nothing but a permanent, hollow silence from the other side? Don't be afraid, because that isn't failure, it is a divine filtering process by destiny itself. There are moments when silence acts as a brutal but necessary sieve, flushing out everything that doesn't belong to you, making room for the values that actually do. You never lose when someone walks away. You only lose when you lose yourself trying to anchor a soul that already had both feet out the door. Look at James. He stood his ground. He kept his silence. And that woman? She walked away and she never looked back. But in the shadows of that letting go, James didn't crumble. He used that stillness to architect a magnificent new life. 6 months later, at the exact moment he stopped begging for validation, James met his wife. A woman who wasn't drawn to sweet, empty words, but to the raw independence and the spirit of steel radiating from a man who had weathered the storm alone. James realized right then, his silence all those months ago wasn't a loss. It was the greatest act of salvation he ever gave himself. Commit this final message to your heart. Stop wasting your youth chasing fleeting butterflies. Go home. Quietly plant your seeds and tend to your own garden until it is lush and vibrant. When your garden is deep enough, the most beautiful butterflies will find their way to you. And even if they don't, you are still left standing in a masterpiece of your own creation, and that is where you truly belong. Letting go isn't the end. It is the birth of true power.